5, 4, 3, 2.
Thanks very much for tuning in this afternoon. This is a talk in commemoration of the International Women's Day, which is earlier in the week. And as part of this talk, I'll be doing a presentation calling it the final resting places of 20 notable women living in Northern Ireland, or from Northern Ireland. So I've tried to make this as representative as possible. So there's folks from all parts of Northern Ireland and from different generations as well. So you'll see on that screen a number of the ladies that'll feature in this short talk. So say 20 women, fascinating females, who I think have made a contribution to life in Northern Ireland. So it's a virtual tour with myself. So they're in chronological order, so I'll get cracking. So the first one then, this is up in Derry City Cemetery, and this is the final resting place of Cecil Frances Alexander. On her headstone, it says CFA, in other words, Cecil Frances Alexander, hymn writer. She's commemorated as wife of William, Bishop of Derry and Raphoe. She died October 12th, 1895. A plaque on the grave also states that Cecil Frances Alexander wrote many poems and hymns. She's best remembered for There is a Green Hill Far Away and All Things Bright and Beautiful. The headstone also commemorates her husband, William Alexander, Bishop of Derry and Raphoe, 1867 to 1896, Archbishop of Armagh, Primate of All Ireland, 1896 to 1911, born April 13th, 1824, died September 12th, 1911. So this is Cecil Frances Alexander in these. This is a photograph of her, and then a little a little caricature of her from one of the books that I've written. This one is from my book 2020, which is 20 graves in each of 20 different local cemeteries. So this is Cecil Frances Alexander featured in the Derry City Cemetery section. And this is a blue plaque in Derry in remembrance of Cecil Frances Alexander. And there's a number of windows in the cathedral up there in her memory. So this is one of the three. This trio of stained glass windows commemorates her. Nearby, then, a son of Cecil Frances Alexander and William is commemorated. He's commemorated as Robert Jocelyn Alexander, son of William Alexander, Primate of All Ireland, and Cecil Frances Alexander, born 11th June 1852, killed in the sinking of SS Leinster by German submarine, 10th October 1918. RMS Leinster was torpedoed and sunk by U-123 whilst bound for Holyhead. Many of the passengers were servicemen returning from periods of home leave. That's the first one, Cecil Frances Alexander, up in Derry City Cemetery. The next remarkable woman then is down in Donaghadee, and this is her headstone here. This magnificent headstone was erected by Grace Neal in lovely remembrance of her husband John Neal, who died 12th June 1860, aged 40 years. Also her son William John, who was drowned at the North Shore, Whitehaven, 19th March 1874, was interred at Moresby Church, aged 30 years. Also her son Hugh, who died at sea 10th November 1876, aged 24 years. And also the above named Grace Neal, who died 7th July 1915, aged 98 years. So the next slide is a little caricature, again from the 2020 book of Grace Neal. And the next slide shows you then the Grace Neal's pub. It claims to be the oldest in Ireland. So Grace is therefore possibly one of the best known names around the Donaghadee and Northdown area. She was born in 1816 during the reign of George III and owned and ran a small pub named after herself, which is probably highly unusual in those days, possibly unique in Ireland. With Donaghadee being such an important, busy port, it's also likely that the business was rather lucrative. Grace's husband, John, was one of the last captains of the Donaghadee Port Patrick mail packet steamers. So this is, you can see there on the slide, Grace Neal's Bar was established in 1611. So the next one is in Dundonald Cemetery, and this is essentially an unmarked grave. It's right at the back of the cemetery, and it's the final resting place of the lady in the photograph, Mary Sloan Gleeson. She was born on the 6th of August 1866, and she was a stewardess of the White Star Line and was on board Titanic during her maiden and only voyage. After the liner's collision with the iceberg, Mary spoke to Thomas Andrews, who advised her that the situation is very serious, but keep the bad news quiet for fear of panic. Shortly afterwards, Mary was standing by one of the lifeboats, which was being filled, when Andrews recognised her and asked her why she was not boarding a lifeboat. Mary apparently replied, "All my friends are staying behind. It would be mean to go." Andrews said, "It would be mean for you not to go. You must get in." Sloan finally agreed and was aboard the lifeboat when it left the ship, with some sources claiming that Mary was amongst the last people to leave the sinking Titanic. After the disaster, Mary returned to England on board the SS Lapland. The next slide shows you the poster for a film from 1979 called SOS Titanic. And in that film, Mary was portrayed, as you can see from that image, by the well-known actress Helen Mirren. So Mary lived in America for many years after the disaster. She returned to Belfast, where she died at Purdyspurn Hospital, while registered as living at 104 Sandown Road in Belfast. She died on the 28th of February 1953, aged 81. But as you saw from the slide there initially, there's no marker at her headstone, which is a great shame. This is a lady who survived the Titanic and was played by Helen Mirren in the 1979 film, and yet SOS Titanic, and yet she's in an unmarked grave in Dundonald Cemetery outside Belfast. So the next of these 20 remarkable ladies I'll be calling their final resting places is Rosamond Prager. This is her family headstone in Hollywood Priory Cemetery. And Rosamond was a renowned sculptress, so she actually had a part in the design of this magnificent headstone. And you can see from the close-up there, it's quite eroded, but it's quite a remarkable piece of work. The next slide shows you a little, again, a caricature from a 2020 book of Rosamond, but also a photograph of her in her studio. So she was born in Hollywood on the 17th of April, 1867. Her parents were Marie Ferrer Patterson and Wilhelm Emil Prager. Her father emigrated to Belfast from Holland to work with his uncle in the family linen company. Rosamond had 5 brothers, and then she studied at Sullivan Upper School, the Belfast School of Art, and the Slade School of Art in London. Following her time in Paris, she returned to Hollywood in 1914, built St. Bridget's Studio on Hibernia Street, where she worked from until her death. And that photograph is taken in her studio in Hibernia Street. She completed her first large commission in 1907, a memorial to Reverend Thomas Hamilton for Queen's University. And she's best known for her sculptures, working primarily in plaster, but also in marble, terracotta, and stone. Her sculptures included Johnny the Jig in Hollywood, Fanula, the daughter of Lear at the Causeway School near Bush Mills, near the Giant's Causeway, and the Lord Edward Carson Memorial in Belfast Cathedral. Prager also modelled figures for the Northern Bank, the Carnegie Library in the Falls Road in Belfast, and the St. Anne's Cathedral. She was the president of the Ulster Academy, later the Royal Ulster Academy, and an honorary academician of the Royal Hibernian Academy. In 1907, she received an honorary MA from Queen's University. In 1938, Sorry, she got that in 1938, and in 1939 was awarded the MBE. She died at Rock Cottage in Hollywood on the 16th of April 1954, aged 86. And there's a blue plaque in Hollywood's Hibernia Street stating Rosamund Prager, sculptor, 1867 to 1954, had her studio here. The next slide, then, the fifth one, is Wilhelmina Geddes, and this is over in Carnmoney East Cemetery. So you can see there's not much to indicate that who's buried in here apart from the surname there of Geddes. But the next slide shows this is a great photograph of Wilhelmina Geddes. And as the photograph might suggest, she worked in stained glass. She was a stained glass artist who was an important figure within the Irish arts and crafts movement, and also the 20th century British stained glass revival. She was born on her maternal grandparents' farm at Drumreilly Cottage in Leitrim on the 25th May 1887. While she was still an infant, her parents moved to their native city of Belfast so her father could set up a business as a building contractor. Wilhelmina began her studies at Methodist College along with her three younger sisters. She later moved to the Belfast School of Art. She was encouraged by Rosamund Prager, who I've just mentioned, to continue her studies. Geddes joined Sarah Purser at the acclaimed stained glass workshop called Anturglaun, or known as the Tower of Glass, in 1910. She was dogged by illness, but she returned to Belfast before 1916 and lived there between there and Dublin until moving in 1925 to work in London at the Glass House in Fulham. She died on 10th August 1955 in London of a pulmonary embolism. She was buried in Carnmoney Cemetery along with her mother and sister Ethel. Even after moving to London, Geddes claimed that her native identity never wavered, as she says she was always a Belfast woman. A plaque was placed by the Ulster Historical Society at Geddes's residence at Marlborough Park South. The next slide shows you some of, next couple of slides show you some of Wilhelmina Geddes's notable works, including windows at St. Bartholomew's in Ottawa in Canada, St. Peter's Church in Lampeter, Wales, and the King Albert Memorial window, Cathedral of St. Martin in Ypres in Belgium. Those are just a few of her fantastic pieces of work. The next remarkable woman is a lady who's well known in local Belfast parlance, because folks, kids of a lot of generations and older people will be familiar with what's referred to as the Lady Dixon Park. This is the final resting place then of Lady Edith Stewart Dixon, DBE, and this is in the Dundonald Cemetery. So these couple of great images show you, what the image to the right and then the painting to the left shows you Lady Edith Stewart Dixon. So the photograph to the right is her outside her house, which is this Wilmond House. So Lady Edith Dixon died on the 20th of January 1964, aged 90, whilst living at 38 Malone Park in Belfast. Her husband, Sir Thomas Dixon, he had predeceased her by 14 years. He died 10th May 1950. And after which time the Wilmond House, this in the photograph, that was sold along with the surrounding lands. They were sold to Belfast City Council in 1959 and are now properly referred to as the Sir Thomas and Lady Dixon Park, best known as the location of the annual Rose Trials in July. So the final photograph in this little section talking about Lady Dixon shows you the back of the headstone as well. That just gives you some idea of where it is in the Dundonald Cemetery. So quite why Lord and Lady Dixon are buried in the Dundonald Cemetery, I don't know, but that's where their final resting place is are there in the Donald Cemetery. So the next one then is over to Greencastle on the outskirts of Belfast, heading up towards the Abbey Centre for anyone that knows there. And this is it's buried in St Mary's Roman Catholic graveyard. Is this lady here to the right of the photograph holding the football? That is Molly Seaton. You can see on her headstone in the next photograph, she's commemorated here as Big Molly Seaton, died 12th January 1974. She was born in North Belfast in 1905, and she lived in Dandy Street, not far from the Belfast docks. Later, she worked in Belfast linen mills. She was tall and very strong, and she became a noted footballer, famous for her hard tackling. She formed a local women's team, Castle Rovers, and was their star player. She gained celebrity status in Belfast football, known for her strong personality as well as her dominance on the pitch. She played for many different teams and in exhibition games organised by Glentoran. She also captained the Ireland teams against teams from England, Scotland and France. In 1927, she joined the best team in Scotland, Rutherglen Ladies. She knew her own worth, and Castle Rovers had paid her 10 shillings a game. She even had her own agent, Joe Farrell, who arranged for her to feature in newspaper advertisements aimed at female readers. Known for her liking of tobacco and beer, she was quite often seen in local pubs like Morrison's Bar or the Edinburgh Castle Hotel. But after the 1930s, she faded to the margins of history. So Mary Ann, Big Molly Seaton, is referred to as Dandy Street's answer to George Best, died on the 12th of January 1974, aged 68. It's only recently that there have been a number of folks have tried to increase awareness of Molly Seaton and say this is her final resting place in St Mary's Roman Catholic graveyard just outside Belfast at Greencastle. So the next one then is this remarkable lady. She is buried in Cornmoney East Cemetery. This is Sadie Patterson. She was born on 5th November 1904. She began working aged 14 for Ewert's Mills in the Crumlin Road in North Belfast. She began to become involved in workers' rights and unionism. So by 1940, she led a call for the unionisation of the Ewert's workforce, and she led 2,000 women on strike for 7 weeks. They achieved better pay and sick leave and holiday pay. Sadie Patterson then began working full-time for the Transport and General Workers Union, where she had special responsibility for women, a position she held for 20 years. She was also an active member of the Girls' Club Union for 50 years. In the 1945 election campaign, she worked for the Northern Ireland Labour Party, and in 1953 she was awarded an MBE. From 1973, Patterson went on to get involved in the peace marches. She was founder of Women Together, and then People Together, and the evolution into the Peace People, and she led Women in Marches. In 1977, she was the first recipient of the World Methodist Peace Award, and in total, Patterson received 5 international peace awards. The remarkable David Blakely wrote a biography of her life, and you can see a copy of that to the right. It's called Sadie Patterson, Irish Peacemaker. And that book was written in 1980. She died in 1985. She's also commemorated on that plaque there, bottom left of the screen, in the Shankle Road Methodist Church in Belfast. And this is Sadie Patterson's final resting place in Cornmoney. And you'll see that World Methodist Peace Award at the top of her headstone from 1977. And she's commemorated there as an Irish peacemaker. This is over for the first time today, to Roselawn Cemetery in the hills above Belfast. And this headstone, it's quite hard to read it because there's quite a lot of flowers in front of it, but it commemorates Grace Bannister OBE, and she died 5th December 1986. And you can see she's commemorated as Lord Mayor of Belfast from 1981 to 82. The next photograph shows you a photograph of Grace Bannister during her spell as Lord Mayor. She was educated at Rosslyn Street Primary School and Park Parade both in Belfast. She left school at 14 in order to work in the family bakery. During the Second World War, she went to work at Mackey's making parts for Sterling bombers to help with the war effort. In 1948, she married John Bannister and was elected to Belfast Corporation in 1965, representing the Ulster Unionist Party. She served as Deputy Mayor in Belfast in 1975 and in 1979 was appointed High Sheriff of Belfast. In 1981, she was elected as the first female Lord Mayor of Belfast, as commemorated on her headstone. She was awarded an OBE in the 1984 New Year's Honours for services to local government in Northern Ireland. And she was living at 34 Grand Parade in Belfast, which is the next slide, when she died on 5th December 1986, aged 62. So that goes back to the days when some folks might remember the Lord Mayor of Belfast had these two magnificent lamps outside their house. Those lamps are now outside the Ulster Hall, so they don't do it anymore. Put the lamps outside the house of the current Lord Mayor. But that's a photograph from 1981-82 when Grace Bannister was the Lord Mayor. I'll say that property is at 34 Grand Parade in East Belfast. Nearby then, the next slide, as part of the Connswater Community Greenway, you'll see this bridge going over the Connswater, and it is called the Grace Bannister Bridge, just to commemorate Belfast's first female Lord Mayor. So the next one then is way down to Ederney in County Fermanagh. This is the final resting place, amongst others, you'll see at the bottom, of Denise Weston Austin. And she died 17th July 1997, aged 71. So this photograph here might explain the relevance of Denise Austin. She was born in 1925 and she was colloquially known as the Elephant Angel. She was the first female zookeeper at Belfast Zoo. During the Belfast Blitz in April 1941, the Ministry of Public Security told the RUC, the Royal Ulster Constabulary, to shoot and kill 33 large animals due to concerns that the German bombings may break their cages and release them into the city. In order to prevent Sheila, a young African elephant, from being killed in this manner, Denise Austin walked the elephant to her house on the Whitewell Road every day after work. British children's author Michael Morpurgo loosely based his 2011 novel An Elephant in the Garden on Austin's story after hearing about her on the radio. Austin also inspired the 2017 film Zoo, written and directed by Colin McIver. Many parts of the movie were also filmed in Belfast, including at the zoo itself. The 2021 novel, The Zookeeper of Belfast by S. Kirk Walsh, was also inspired by Austin's actions to look after the elephant during World War II. Sheila the elephant survived the war, living at the zoo for 25 more years until her death in 1966. And Austin herself, as you saw from her headstone, died on the 17th July 1987, aged 71, and is buried in Ederney in County Fermanagh. So the next one this is a personal one. This is a remarkable lady. This is my granny Craig. So this is again in Roselawn Cemetery. She passed away 9th October 2001. So I'm not really going to say much about my granny because I can't. But this is them on their wedding day, 4th of the 4th, 44. I think my granny, she wore the trousers. So she told my granda that that's when they're going to get married. So he couldn't forget their wedding anniversary. It's a lovely photograph. It's also the front cover of my book about Roselawn Cemetery. And their headstone is the back cover. And this is us and my family when in my gran and granda's house in 5 Kensington Avenue in Belfast. This is in the days when I had a fringe, I believe it's called. So that's me over to the right. My granny there, my granda, and then over to the left is my brother, and then my two cousins. Sadly, the eldest girl there, Caroline, was killed in a plane crash at Orange Airport last year. So that's Caroline on my granda's knee, and then my other cousin Kelly, and then the family dog Mac. So very, very happy memories of my granny and granda. That's in Kensington Avenue in Belfast. So the next one then is over again to the Donald Cemetery, and this is the final resting place of Mary Glasgow. So you can see on her headstone it says Mary Glasgow MBE, died 26th January 2004, age 101, highly respected as a Christian worker and teacher, and also as a friend to many during her internment in a POW camp in the Far East during the Second World War. So that's the next slide is of Mary Glasgow. She lived at Dunleary Park in Dundonald, where I used to live, and she was admitted then to Dunleary Nursing Home in 1982, but she lived there for 12 years before her death, aged 101, as it says in her headstone. So because of her experience, Mary Glasgow's experience in the Far East during the war, you can see from the next slide, it shows it's one of the promotional posters for the popular series Tenko. So the BBC, when they were making Tenko, then they used Mary Glasgow as a consultant because of her experience of the Far East during the war. So that's Mary Glasgow. We're back up to Roselawn again. And this is remarkable. The final resting place is remarkable. Lillian Spence. You can see she's commemorated there in the middle. Lillian Mary Spence died 28th January 2008, aged 109 years. So the next slide shows you Mary before she reached the ton, reached 100, and then this is her in her latter days. This is with the Bishop of Down in Connor, Harold Miller, not long before her death. She was born on New Year's Eve in 1898, and she lived at 64 Beers Bridge Road, where she died aged 109. She was predeceased by her husband Eddie, and he died in 1979. And Lily had 8 children. Until her death, she lived with one of her daughters next door to Spence's fish and chip shop, which is in the next photograph, and which was a family business started by Eddie in 1921. When asked what her secret of a long life was, she replied, hard work and clean living. Lily was a member of the Willowfield Parish Church and was visited regularly by the rector at the time, the Reverend now Bishop David McCabe, as well as my mum when she worked for Willowfield Church. So Spence's Chippy is still going strong to this day, and you can sit in there in these little highly uncomfortable booths, but there's a lot of interesting information on the walls, including information about George Best. That's the remarkable Lillian Spence. Again, still in Roselawn, the next headstone then is Helen Lewis. She's only commemorated on the headstone there in the middle as 22nd of the 6th, 1916 to the 31st of the 12th, 2009. But you'll also see commemorated there as her mother, and she's commemorated as 10th August 1893 to 1942 ? And she's commemorated because she was a victim of the Holocaust with no known resting place. This is Helen Lewis here in the next slide. She was born into a German-speaking Jewish family in Trutnov in the Kingdom of Bohemia. She survived 2 selections by Dr. Joseph Mengele and was later sent to the Stutthof concentration camp in northern Poland. When the war ended, she returned to Prague, where she learned of her husband's death during a forced march, while her mother Elsa Katz, who had been deported in 42 had died at the Sobibor extermination camp, and as we saw, is commemorated on the headstone as a victim of the Holocaust with no known resting place. After Helen Lewis's marriage to Harry Lewis in Prague in 1947, the couple moved to Belfast, where Helen began to work as a choreographer, also teaching modern dance. Her book, A Time to Speak, was published in 1992, was translated into several languages, and then adopted for the theatre by the late great Sam McCready. In the 2001 birthday honours, Helen Lewis was awarded an MBE for her services to contemporary dance. So the next photograph shows you where Helen had her studios, and this building was built to house Victoria College. So there are two blue plaques on this, one to commemorate the lady Margaret Byers, who founded Victoria College, but another one for Helen Lewis, and it commemorates her as a dancer, choreographer, writer, and Holocaust survivor who found peace and a home in Belfast. And it says she taught dance here. That's remarkable, Helen Lewis. The next one then is it's this lady, and it's down in Movilla Cemetery in the hills above Newtownards. And her name is Audley Patterson. So this is her final resting place here. You'll see devoted daughter, about halfway down, Audley Anna Barber, nee Patterson, born 31st January 1932, died 20th June 2011, aged 79 years. And opposite then is the final resting place of her parents. So you can see her father, Joseph, he's commemorated as mentioned in dispatches, South Russia, 1918, and died aged 91. Also his wife, Juliet, of Tukums in Latvia. And it says there on her headstone, she fled German, Russian, and Turkish conflicts 1914 to 1918. She died 1997, aged 90 years. Two great people, loved and honoured by their 4 children. This is Audley Patterson with her husband, Chris Barber. She was born in Cumber on the 31st of January 1932, as we heard, and she was youngest of 4 children. She was introduced in the summer of 1954 to the Chris Barber Jazz Band. She joined the band full time and made her first appearance at the Royal Festival Hall in 1955. For the next 7 years, she toured extensively with the Chris Barber Jazz Band and issued many recordings, also featuring on numerous Chris Barber records. They were married in 1959, divorced in 1983. Audley Patterson began to suffer throat problems and ceased to appear and record regularly with Chris Barber, officially retiring from the band in 1973. In early 1983, she gave a series of concerts around London. And then her last recording was in 1984, before her death, then 20th of June 2011, aged 79. So the next slide shows you a still from a recent program about Audley Patterson. This is Dana Masters, well-known jazz singer, and she did a fascinating program on the BBC about the life and trials of Audley Patterson. So there is a blue plaque unveiled in February 2012 at Audley Patterson's birthplace in Cornishire Terrace in Cumber. That's just behind the Andrews Memorial School. So that's remarkable Audley Patterson. She rests in Movilla Cemetery above Ards. Let's back up to Derry City Cemetery, and this is the final resting place of Ines McCormick. She died, as you can see from her headstone, 21st January 2013. And that shows you basically the main entrance to the Derry City Cemetery in the Lone Moor Road, just bottom left, or not bottom left, middle left of the of that photograph, and you can maybe see in the distance Derry's famous walls. So the next slide shows you Innes McCormick in the pink there with Meryl Streep. Innes McCormick was a trade union leader and human rights activist, and she was the first female president of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. She represented the Unison Union. She also successfully campaigned for the inclusion of strong equality and human rights provisions in the Good Friday Agreement and was a signatory to the McBride Principles for Fair Employment. In 2002, she was described as probably the best known and most experienced human rights campaigner in this country. McCormick founded participation and the practice of rights, a human rights organisation supporting disadvantaged groups based in Belfast, which she continued to advise until her death in 2013, aged 69. Throughout her career, she crossed sectarian lines and national boundaries to fight for those who have faced, in her own words, the humiliation of exclusion, particularly women. McCormick was named by the American publication Newsweek in 2011 as one of the 150 women who shake the world. And her life and work have been portrayed by Meryl Streep, who she's pictured with in the documentary play Seven. Shortly before her death in Foyle Hospice, when asked why she did the work that she did, McCormick replied, "At the heart of everything, I desire to see the glint in a woman's eye who was told that she was a nobody when she realised she was somebody." So that's the remarkable Innes McCormick. Only a few more to go now. This is back into Dundonald Cemetery. And this is the final resting place of Kathleen Bowden. You can see from the little plaque on her headstone. She died 16th March 2017, aged 103 years. She's commemorated as a much-loved aunt. And this is Kathleen in her youth, in her prime, with the person who put that plaque there. This is the man called Clark Groves. A well-known name, and certainly in East Belfast. This is the two of them were very, very close, and Kathleen herself was the daughter of Clark and Mary Groves, in other words, Clark Senior. And her father set her up in business as a hairdresser with premises near Hollywood Arches in Belfast. She ran the business for decades until the building was destroyed in an accidental gas explosion, and then she finally retired. She did several very famous clients, including Lady Brookborough, who she also became firm friends with. She would also often go on cinema trips together, and Kathleen was invited over to London to style Lady Brookborough's hair, and those are her royal compatriots for the coronation in 1953. Also interred in this grave is Kathleen's husband, Hugh, who was living at 14 Knockhill Park when he died on the 15th November 1968, aged 64. Kathleen died, as I said, on the 16th of March 2017, aged 103 years. She was interred about 18 months after her death, after leaving her body to Queen's University for medical research. So that's the remarkable Kathleen Bowden. And this is her celebrating her 100th birthday. The next slide then, this is again in Dundonald Cemetery outside Belfast. This is Emily DeSano. She's commemorated there at the bottom of the headstone as died 15th December 2018. The next slide shows you a little clip, next couple of slides actually, and show you a little feature called Eastside Lives, when a local charity, the Eastside Partnership, tried to increase awareness of people who are perhaps forgotten. So this is the one for Emily DeSano. You can see it's in the grounds of Westbourne Presbyterian Church, known local on Newton Ards Road, known locally as a shipyard church. And the next slide is a little close-up of it. This is a photograph of Emily when she was a good bit younger. So she met Pasquale DeSano, who was 25 years her senior, and he had stowed away on a boat from Italy to England, and he was befriended by a man with a barrel organ and a monkey. And finally, he found work in an ice cream shop where he fell in love with Emily. The couple opened DeSano's ice cream shop and had 3 children. After the death of Pasquale, known locally as Sammy, in 1951, Emily continued to work there. She lived in the house next door to the shop, which had a bookcase on the wall which could be pulled back to reveal a door, and through the secret passage was the ice cream business. This other photograph shows you Sammy with Emily, and then the further photograph then shows you Emily in later life. When asked what she attributed her long life to, she said salmon and soya sauce, presumably also ice cream. As I say, she ran a very successful ice cream business, still going to this day on the Newtownards Road in Belfast. So that's the remarkable Emily DeSano. The penultimate grave I'm going to talk about now is again back up in the Roselawn, and this is Georgina, known as Ina McCabe. She died 28th of March 2019. She was 101 years and 7 months old. The next slide shows you Ina McCabe, and she was a very, very good cyclist. She was born on the 10th of August 1917. She lived in Park Avenue in Belfast before her marriage. In 1953, then she became the first woman to win the Best All-Rounder Cup and travelled all over the world with her husband and her beloved bicycle. And the next slide shows you that bicycle. It's now in the Ulster Transport Museum. Now, Ina McCabe, she held the record for the time it took to cycle from Derry Post Office to Belfast Post Office in 1953. She had 4 hours to complete the journey, and she did it in 3 hours and 46 minutes. Ina's husband, who was a joiner, died in 1989. But speaking on her 100th birthday, which is in that photograph there, the next one, Ina said, it's a very long time to be alone, but Ina was very grateful for the happy memories she can cherish. We love children and family, but we put cycling in front of that, so we never had any children, she added. She also involved in the Ballymacarrt railway disaster. Thankfully, she survived that and went on to a long life. Say she was aged 101 years and 7 months when she died. The final grave, folks, that I'll call that is in Cornmoney Main Cemetery, and this is the final resting place of the well-known, journalist Lyra McCabe. So she's commemorated at the top of the headstone there as Lyra Catherine McCabe, born 31st March 1990, and died, actually murdered, 18th April 2019. She's commemorated as a treasured daughter, beloved sister, doting auntie, loving partner, and friend to all. And you might be able to see those stars on the headstone. That actually represents what's called the Lyra constellation, a grouping of stars. And it's quite hard to see in this image, but there's a little pen there at the base of the headstone, and it commemorating that she was a well-known, upcoming and well-known journalist. Sadly, her mother died within the year of her daughter's murder. This is Lyra McCabe here in this photograph, and she's commemorated on a mural down near the Sunflower Bar, as you can see there in Belfast, besides Belfast Central Library, and what was one of her quotes. So she was a local journalist, Lyra McCabe was, who wrote for several publications about the consequences of the Troubles. She also served as an editor for Media Gazer and a news aggregator website. Tragically, on the 18th of April 2019, she was fatally shot during rioting in the Craigan area of Derry when she was up there with her partner and also reporting on the trouble up there. And sadly, as we know, she was killed. So her funeral service, despite being she was from a Roman Catholic background, and despite that, though, the Church of Ireland then offered the use of St Anne's Cathedral for Léire McCabe's funeral service. So just to accommodate the huge number of people who wanted to get in to St Anne's or wanted to pay tribute to Léire McCabe. So there's been a film, as you can see, bottom right of the screen there, about Léire and to commemorate her remarkable but sadly all too short life. So I'll finish with three quirky ones just. This is the Donald Cemetery. This is in loving memory of a great aunt, Frances Hannah, and it says no surrender. So no prizes for guessing maybe what way she voted at the elections. Then the next one then is this one here, Mary Doyle. She died 28th of September 2006, aged 59. Sorry, age 60. But you can see at the base of the headstone then it says forever 39. So actually, Mary Doyle apparently had 21 39th birthdays. Then the final one then, that was in Roselawn, so was this one. And this commemorates, amongst others, Isabella Duff Nee Curry. She's commemorated as being born on 26th November 1929 and dying on the 3rd of August 2017. She's commemorated as a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. Then it says, this is the quietest she has ever been. And then the base of the headstone, loved by all. So these are my first 4 books. And I've done another couple after that. I've done one recently about 50 footballers and also about the Princess Victoria disaster. My next book, I'm hoping it will be called 50 Fascinating Females. So talking about the majority of folks who I mentioned in this talk and a number of others as well. So a number of the folks who have talked about today do feature in the previous books as well, especially as I mentioned earlier, the 2020 book. So thanks very much for tuning in, and say this was for International Women's Day 2023. Thank you.